good way of understanding the organizing process is, and there's actually a great quote. It's a process by which a personal problem becomes a political issue. There was a sociologist some years ago in the United States named C. Wright Mills, who wrote a book called The Power Elite, and a number of others. And this is how he defined dialectical politics. Regardless of what the context is, it's a very good way of understanding how a membership-based organization makes decisions. You listen, which turns out to be way more important than talking, to members every day, on the doors, in meetings, at the street corner, whatever. And eventually, as you hear things, that people start from a place that their issue, that their problem is a personal problem. Maybe it's their fault, or maybe it's something they did. And it's only as they meet and join with others that they start to realize that their very personal problem about welfare, about housing, about wages, about whatever, may be shared by lots of people. And in the organizational process, as you put all those people together in the same organization and take action, that very personal problem in its evolution becomes a political issue. You've seen that happen, I bet. It's worth keeping in mind. Okay, so we built groups by something we called the ACORN model. And you're getting a fair idea of how a lot of it worked. Certainly involved all these principles I've discussed, coordinator autonomy. But let me just go through some of the central pieces. One, we always built every organization, whether it's in the labor workplace context or in a community context, on an organizing committee. That organizing committee would be people from that area, from that workplace, who would take the responsibility to carry the weight of the organizing drive. Seems so simple, doesn't it? Everybody would be organized. This is all, none of this is like rocket science. I mean, it's all very straightforward. So if you organize in a neighborhood, let's say there are 3,000, 2,000 households in a particular neighborhood in Hilton or the one you said, what would you imagine would be a good organizing committee? What size would it be? 2,000 families, 10 people, would that be enough? A lot of work, getting a hold of 2,000 different households. Take a guess. I mean, none of you are paid organizers. We're just having a conversation here.
As big as you can manage. I mean, as big as the people, for me, like when I'm organizing, I want as many people involved as possible because then it empowers them and share the workload and everybody has their own network. So put a maximum on it and say as many as we can actually organize it.
How about a minimum? Put a minimum on it. What would be the least you'd be willing to organize 2,000 people with?
10 to get someone off the ground.
10 would be enough?
That's how the whole tax one.
Well, that's a very Leninist view of the world.
That's slow.
Well, let's say we're Maoists, not Leninists. So let's go for 20 or 30 or 40. Just let's share the work, as you're saying. What would be a good minimum, you think? Would you feel comfortable with less than 20?
Well, to be honest, I've done a lot of organising with two of us, so
You what?
it's a lot of stuff with just two of us, but it's been hard.
I'm not saying it's not possible with, one person and a deck of cards. I'm just saying, hey, we're just talking about a model. Where would you start in building a model? Let's say if you're organizing 2,000 people, let's now, 2,000 households. Let's just say 20. Let's pick a figure. Where would that organizing committee come from? Here's the neighborhood. You're trying to build an organization throughout this neighborhood. Where would you, geographically, where would you want organizing committee, these 20 people to come from? Everywhere, right. I mean, what good would it do you if all of them were here? I mean, yeah, you might have 20 people, but would they be the 20 people that could organize it all here? This is what happens in many labor union organizing drives that are started by, this is why hot shops, if you know what I'm talking about, don't work. Because hot shops means in the United States that you got to call, a union got to call from a particular, maybe there were 200 workers, and everybody in the paint department called and said, we need a union here, it's terrible here, we've got to organize. Well, if you're only in the paint department, where there are 15 workers and there are 200 workers in the plant, that organizing drive is never going to work unless you can get out of that paint department and get somebody from everywhere, whether it's a nursing home or whatever. Well, the same thing is true in the neighborhood. So if you want 20 people, and you may have a couple of names, you really want people sort of everywhere, which is what somebody said over here in the state. How do you find these people? You don't have the organization yet. You've got little old you trying to organize this community. You and a friend, as you just said, or partner or colleague or whatever. So how do you find these 20 people that might give you the sense? Yeah.
You have to get the information out there, don't you, first of all? So my instinct would be to write stories and start communicating about what you need and what you want. John's would be to go and knock on doors, I guess. So there's a number of strategies. Is that the right track?
We're just having a conversation, so there's no wrong track yet. We're going to get to what we do, but yeah.
So I think about this like fishing. So if you find information that obviously people are going to catch on to that, not like just think about it in sort of waves. I like seeing analogies. So like your first wave of people will be able to put information out there the first time, and get only the people maybe like 4 or 5, and then once you've got that, you can start having a discussion about more pointed sort of information gathering stories, as you said, and then trying to go out and put that information in a more sort of, organized fashion, and then getting a bigger wave of other people, and then sort of building it that way, and then being able to like, public meetings, just for like actual campaigns.
Okay, now you're way ahead of us. We're just still trying to get an organizing committee. You want to, So if you're fishing in this pool, this lake or river, you're going to find the deep pools where you might find the fish you're trying to go to. And if you're down here with your original, colleagues, you're not going to find any fish up here unless you go up there somehow and figure out where to meet people. Which is, I guess, a little bit like fishing and finding where the riffles are and where the deeper pools are and what your fish is. Well, there are lots of ways to meet people. You can meet people on the corner, you can meet people by going to local organizations, you can meet people by, I guess door knocking, as you just said. John might, go hit a door or two. Well, he might have a reason to. Or you can put the names together by people who know people. Maybe I know somebody who's involved in an organization over here, and I go visit with them, call it door knocking, and they give me 5 names over here, and 2 over there. Maybe also I've got this problem that this is a very diverse neighborhood. There may be, people, I think in the neighborhood we were walking in yesterday, there was a large Polish community, there were an African community as well. If I want those represented, I've got to just get somebody or bodies part of the organizing committee. So maybe there's some kind of area or eating place or association or church or labor union, or you go to what are the gatekeepers for that community. And in those gatekeepers, you do 2 things with those gatekeepers. One, you communicate what you're trying to do, because you're transparent about it. You either get their support or you neutralize their opposition, both of which could be important. You don't want to fight anybody you're trying to organize. At the same time, you might get lucky. Maybe they'll think what you're doing is a good idea, or at least they'll be positive. They'll say, "This is a crazy young kid. Hey, why not give the kid a chance?" Yeah, you don't know. You don't know. Once again, don't stutter. Go ahead. So you talk to Joe or Jane or whoever that might be, and what the second thing you want is names. Pretty much a rule of all organizing. If you hear a name 3 times, you go find that person. That is somebody who, by definition, is a community leader because they already have a base. They may not be good for your organization, but they might be great for your organizing committee. And if they're not involved in an existing organization, they may be wide open to be involved. There are famous stories about this in organizing. There's in the United States, there's a community organizer who became a labor leader named Cesar Chavez, who organized the United Farm Workers Union, if anybody's ever heard of this. And now there's even in the Latino community, there's Cesar Chavez's birthday celebrated, whatever. But he started just like y'all are starting as a community organizer. But before he was a community organizer, there was somebody like me, somebody like you, named Fred Ross, who was organizing in Fresno. And he kept hearing this name. Hey, if you're really going to build, his organization was called the Community Service Organization, CSO. If you're really going to build this organization, have you got Cesar Chavez involved? Well, he kept hearing Chavez's name, figured he better find him. 3 different times he door knocked on Chavez's house. Every time, the first 2 times he got there, they said he wasn't home. Not interested. Well, where Chavez is? You know, what was this Anglo guy looking for? No, got nowhere. Finally, the 3rd time, he ran to the back door and caught Chavez going out the back door, forced him to have a conversation with him about the organization they were building. You know, he had 30 or 40 years, and you know, Cesar Chavez, the leader of the farm workers, great community organizer, great labor leader. And I'm not going to say that's going to happen to all of you, but the point is, you're looking for people you hear about. And some people you won't hear about. Some people have never been involved in organizations. You'll find and they'll be attracted to the work and be willing to do the work. But in building this organizing committee of 20 people, the organizing committee is key because you can't do the work by yourself. I'm not saying you couldn't, but you should. You have to take as a principle in community organizing that you were lazy, not that you're hardworking. That it's better for other people to do the work than you. And that's not to say you don't do, your share of 12 and 13-hour days. It's not to say you don't worry about it. It's not to say you're not, on the pieces and making the list. But you want to always ask people to do the work. And it doesn't say that you might not think you can do the work better, or that you could do it more professionally, or you could do it faster, or whatever. And when it comes to typing and stuff like that, I mean, those are real challenges. But the point becomes, if you're going to have an organizing committee, you really need people who can team up to go, in our model, we would hit the doors on all 2,000 of those units. So one person in a 4-week period can't hit 2,000 doors. It's just literally humanly impossible. And certainly you can't do it well. But now if you have teams of 10 or you have 20 people out there also building additional teams, or you have weekly organizing committees, which is part of our model, then you have a good shot at it. Now, you don't have forever to build an organization. I guess if you were doing it all by yourself and had 2,000 houses, you could take 20 weeks to do it. You could take 5 months. Would that be a good way to do it, or how do you get, part of what the ACORN model is based on an organizing drive over 4 to 6 weeks from the time you have the organizing committee. An organizing committee that's meeting weekly because they have to discuss, they have to measure the progress, how many doors are done, they have to look at how many yeses, how many maybes, they have to also report on what issues they're hearing. Because we believe that going into the first meeting, when you talk about issues, you're hearing all those issues by listening in these exchanges you're having in the doors. That's the organizing committee meeting. But part of what builds the organization is a sense of immediacy. You don't get that if you take 6 months or a year to organize it. You want people to understand that not like other organizations, not like other agencies, not like other nonprofits, their issue that they feel now is so important that it has to be dealt with now, not in the by and by. And the only way you get that is having a fixed timeline to really build a strong organization that can demonstrate that, in fact, people will come together, they will discuss the issues, they will actually make decisions, and opposed to many organizations, they will take action. And almost every part of that is different than a lot of people's organizational experience. Because what you will have been hearing in those doors, whether those doors are in Mumbai or Kenya or the United States or here in Scotland, you'll hear all their bad experiences with the organization, all the reasons you will fail. Debbie Downer will be on parade. It'll be, Loserville. I mean, everybody has an organization that ripped them off, promised them wrong, did them dirty, was corrupt, whatever. So you will have just a litany of despair that you'll be listening to. So please don't get depressed, take yourself off, do whatever you have to do. The point is, you know where you're going because the organizing committee is processing all this information on a weekly basis and keeps pushing forward, listening and turning people back to the issues and challenging people to commit and engage with the organization because it will be different this time. And you have to prove it's different in the way you work. So what do you do when you're out there? Somebody was making a point about John's out door knocking. Well, he's out there door knocking. What's he doing? Just out for a stroll, having a chat? What's up with that door knocking? What would you imagine would be the key elements that you want to make sure John and anybody else was communicating on the doors?
People you speak to need to have a thing then that they feel they can do, whether it's coming to a meeting or participating in another activity you've got planned.
Yeah, I've got a sense that there'll be action. Okay.
You've got to say that their issues are being listened to, you're not trying to project agenda on them.
You gotta know you're not hustling. You gotta know, what you're listening.
When we were doing it, we were focused on a specific campaign for the most recent time, but we were also asking people what their other issues were, and we were making notes and taking kind of details. We had a petition, and we kind of started explaining if they were really good, and also trying to get more contact details from them. But we also had different levels of activity. Basic level was signing a petition, pretty much everybody did. We also had
You did that on the doors or at the meeting or what?
Well, we had two meetings because it's easier to go door knocking when it's better, you get the people that way. And we had meetings as well. We had a little demonstration at the end as well. But we were also trying to get people to hang banners, and there was also from the housing association had a set of different activities that we kind of scaled up. So we tried to get people more involved, and also we wanted people to take petitions around then and to get people, which worked quite well as well. So we had kind of different levels of that, but also we're building for our long-term organisation, so we wanted to make contact with people, find out what their issues were, and budget tax came up, so we're going to start making a list of people who registered for budget tax.
You have to decide what you want, because you're listening to a million things, right? And, y'all are going to all teach me, Scottish slang, I'm going to teach you a lot of American slang too, down on that, but you always have to be careful in organizing terms that you don't swallow the ask. What could that possibly mean? Swallowing the ask. It's a little bit like this is not stuttering when you ask it, but swallowing the ask means if you want people to physically be at the first meeting, you can't give them a way to commit to something else other than being at the first meeting. Right? So if you give them, if they're going to a grocery store and they get to shop for apples, oranges, and bananas, and tomatoes, they're going to decide which one of those four things you're putting in front of them they want to buy. If you want them to only buy one thing, you have to narrow the choice. You have to not swallow the ask. Follow me at all? So if you really, in the ACORN organizing model, we would always see we would always ask as part of the conversations with organizing committee members, community leaders, and others, what they defined as a large organization in their community. What was a big meeting? Was it 50 people? Was it 40 people? Was it 100? Because those things gave you a sense of what the benchmarks were in terms of people's expectations of an organization. So if in this community of 2,000 we were doing, if people said, hey, so-and-so organization organized, 5 years ago, they had 50 people to a meeting, they really got together, maybe, that. Well, then you say, look, there's going to be more than 50 people at this meeting. I could almost bet you, if I were a bettor, I'm an organizer, I'm not a gambler, but if I was betting, I could bet there's going to be more than 50 people. So you're trying to actually, in those kind of terms, you're actually trying to prove that you're going to have something that people will immediately see is different from what their experience of organizing is in that particular context. Whether it's 20 or 200 or whatever it is, this is a piece of information as an organizer you might want to know. And although I understand what you're saying, and it's all right and wrong, whatever, and the point is, if one of the things you're trying to do is create this sense of a happening, that the building of that organization is the most important thing people have ever seen in that neighborhood, then you need to do everything that builds that momentum. Posters everywhere, everybody's talking about it, people are showing up in churches, you're all saying, are you going to the meeting? You're doing, multiple contacts with people, and you're doing everything possible to put bottles in the chairs. So that you can have people feel when they walk into the meeting, wow, something's going to be different here. This is not Debbie Downer land. This is really going to be, this could be a strong organization. I'm going to take this seriously. I'm glad I paid dues already. I don't have to stand in line and do it now. If you think about it, these visits, you only have so much time on the doors, right? You have 2,000 doors. You can't be, spend half hour with everybody, can you? So how do you structure what you have to say so that you efficiently get the job done? Let me suggest 4 things that you need to make sure are part of the core exchange or organizing practice. And many of you have already touched on these points. The first is just the introduction. Who are you? What are you doing at the door? I mean, that's a natural question, right? What is this organization? So, I'm Wade Rathke. I'm an organizer for ACORN International. We're talking to people all throughout the neighborhood. Here's my buddy, neighborhood resident. And a lot of people are talking about building a community organization here as part of ACORN. So you're introducing yourself, who you are, what it's about. The second piece is just an explanation. That's how you start moving people into understanding the organization. This community organization is going to be a little different. It's going to be membership-based. We're going to elect leaders at the first meeting. We're going to talk about issues. We're going to make a decision about campaigns. There's going to be a decision about the first action that we make at that first meeting. This organization is based on membership. People pay dues. Here's what the dues are. You have to be transparent. Don't sneak up on them and say, oh, hey, I'm glad you said yes. Let me tell you about the dues. Oh, did I tell you about the dues? Let me tell you about the amount now. No, you got to, the dues, the dues are very reasonable. Dues are $10 a month, £10 a month, whatever I do the dues. And we're encouraging people to join now. One of the things y'all wouldn't like that, no matter where I've been in the world, no matter what neighborhood in the United States, we have never been an ACORN member there. As part of the draft, we always say, hey, we're organizing with ACORN. You've heard of ACORN? Almost everybody, everywhere in the world will look at me in the eye and say, yeah, I've heard of ACORN. Because they want to believe they've heard an organization that's going to make a difference. I'm not really clear about it because it's not on TV or whatever. Well, how could they have seen it in Buenos Aires on TV? But the point is, people in our community want to believe that this kind of organization is possible. And you're basically helping facilitate what they want to believe, that someday in their lives, there'll be an organization they can be part of, they can help lead, that will really fight and make a difference. So yeah, they may not know the name. The name may be the one you're saying now, but so introduction, explanation, and then you have engagement. And that's when you're listening and talking with people about issues. Now, you're not going in there taking a survey. You're not a pollster. You're not working for the government. In fact, in a huge number of cases where we do organizing, we have to first prove as part of the explanation we're not part of the government. We're not an insurance agent. We're not selling anything. This is what we do. That's part of why, having somebody with you and doing this route is so important. In the engagement, you're talking about how to hear. And when you first ask people, what are your issues in the neighborhood? 9 out of 10 times what people tell you, you got no issues. Oh, my issues? Issues? I don't know, hey, no problem. No problem, no issues. And so a lot of people, when you say to them, hey, any problems in the neighborhood, any issues you're worried about? Nothing I can think of. So that's testing again, because it's not like people don't have issues. They all have a mountain load of issues. It's just people want to know what is an issue? What does an issue mean? We may know in the language of organizing that an issue is something, like a bedroom tax or like, loose dogs or, bad garbage pickup or whatever, but it's not necessarily you're sitting in the house on the other side of the exchange, you're going to jump out with loose dogs. I mean, why would you think loose dogs is even an issue? So we always say a lot of, after we ask about the issues, we have a lot of people in the neighborhood are talking about A, B, and C. I don't know if these are issues for you, or there may be other issues that are more important to you, but you basically move the discussion from the general to something more specific so that people who aren't sitting there with a huge grievance can respond as part of this dialectical process. Yeah, you know what? Loose dogs suck. I don't like loose dogs. People may think I'm trivializing, but if you ever can figure out, and I have not been able to in all my years of organizing, how to deal with 3 issues: loose dogs, bad garbage pickup, and terrible drainage, you basically can organize enough power to take over the world. I know that's not how you want to see the issues, but those 3 things resonate everywhere in the world. I don't care if the fanciest cities in the UK or the United States or Canada to the largest slums in the world. If you solve those 3 things, you're halfway there or more. But the point is, so people are talking about the bedroom tax. Sometimes you're saying, hey, a lot of people are talking about the bedroom tax. How do you feel about that? Well, you'll hear it. Are there other issues? So once you get people, we're talking about engagement. Once you get people engaged and they're talking and you're listening, it almost matters not at all what you're saying anymore. It only matters what they're saying. And that's the point of this tete-a-tete, this door-knocking exchange, is to get people talking so that they will tell you what they're really thinking, what their issues are, and then you can move them into the next stage, the 4th stage, which is commitment. And you're trying to get them to commit on a number of levels, that they become a member. And we always, in the model I'm familiar with, we always ask people right then to join the organization. I know this seems totally aspectless to people. Well, why would they join an organization? The organization hasn't had a meeting. Why would they be paying dues? They haven't seen the organization deliver. They haven't seen what you can do for them. What you can do for them? It's all what them can do for them. We don't do anything for them. They pay dues to their organization. We have succeeded in convincing them already, based on their own words to us, that they want and need an organization. If you want and need an organization, you're probably willing to join now, aren't you? You know what? We sign up a lot of members on the door the first time. We see it. First time they've ever heard of it. First time you're organizing the group. Because people, once again, this is not sales. This is really what people want. You can't get people to do something they don't want to do. None of you are good enough. I'm not good enough. So a lot of people join. Generally, in a group, in hitting 2,000 doors, predictably, you'll have 150 to 200 people that join before the first meeting. Not all the people that join will be at the first meeting. Some people who will be at the first meeting, they never join. We actually get people to join and then talk to them about coming to the meeting. We always take nothing but a yes. They don't join, we keep moving. And you come to the meeting. Here's when the meeting is. You need to run, whatever. But you always leave with a yes, never with a no. And that's the stage of commitment. So, and then no matter what people say, you come to the meeting or not, as an organizer, you obviously rate the prospects of whether or not they're a yes, no, maybe, or whatever the system is. In political turnout, we do a 5-point system. In union elections, we do a 3 to 5. And basically, we're not even a 3-point system is fine. No, yes, maybe. You're always no's, don't worry about it. Don't ever waste your time on a no. Part of the reason you're door knocking is to bring some people in the organization and some people to keep out of the organization. Once again, I know that sounds contrary to what you normally believe, but it really doesn't help you if you have 200, 250, 300 people in a meeting to have really done the job to get that drunk to the meeting. So if you're door knocking with somebody who's, 3 sheets to the wind and you're, hearing all their crazy theories after they're, 2 or 3 pints down, you don't necessarily want to make a big point of them coming to the meeting because the odds are they're going to stand up in the back and, who knows what's going to happen. So if you want to be a liberal, join that party. If you want to be an organizer, you have to make decisions about how to build your organization. So you're looking for who you really want in, and for those people who are just whack out there, you're getting out of that door. So you make an assessment no matter what people are saying. The maybes and yeses, you're on like, white on rice. You're all over that. Between that point of the door knocking, you're doing reminder phone calls, you're on the organizing committee, you do second visits with people who are potential leaders. Those people that are potential leaders, you're invited to join the organizing committee so that the organizing committee grows and expands. You're invited to take the role. You have to be always clear that part of what you're doing in the structure described is also training leadership, because the odds that organizing committee members will be elected to the first group of officers in that group are huge. Because who will everybody have seen? You will have seen people out on the doors working, so it's a sweat equity system. You will have seen people work hard. They aren't necessarily the most charismatic. They aren't necessarily people who give the best speech. They aren't necessarily somebody who will follow the barricades, but they've seen that person in their doors all throughout the neighborhood, wearing a t-shirt, putting up posters, handing out flyers, on the phone, calling to remind meetings. Who are they going to vote for as an officer? I mean, is there a mystery to democracy? Not really, but it's based on the work of an organizing class. It's almost a surprise when somebody who's not on the organizing committee gets elected. But we always, in our groups, did temporary officers regardless for the first several months, so that once the experience of actually taking action on the campaigns happened, the membership had a chance to determine whether or not the people they just met should have full terms. I don't want to get too much in the weeds because now we're in the esoterics of organizing, building a model. Everybody can make good judgments, but sometimes people spring up in a meeting, they get elected, and they have first action, they're afraid to walk into the city council chambers. If that person has a 2-year term, that organization's got trouble. So they need to have a way in which people can have a graceful exit from leadership, or see people who rose through the campaign and the actions and whatever, and have them rewarded with a more stable leadership position. 9 out of 10 times, the temporary leaders become the permanent leaders. But your job as an organizer, my job as an organizer, is basically going to protect the growth of the organization. So you're not able to be Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm and just assume everything's going to come out great. You have to actually organize in the premise that everything could go really bad. So you better be on top of building the infrastructure that makes sure that it doesn't go that bad. Okay, so door knocking, what are the 4 elements? Introduction. Explanation. Engagement. Commitment. You get through life remembering those things about door knocking. I don't care if you're an organizer or not. That's probably a good thing. That'll help you in a lot of the changes you have, casual conversations. What do you say? You're meeting somebody for the first time. Give it a mind. Got to create a happening. Obviously, the more you're in touch with people. What happens at this first meeting you're in? You've already heard in some ways, right? You walk in, you're going to sign an attendance list. If you haven't joined, you're going to go to a membership table and be asked to join. There's an election, obviously. Like I said, people, the first officers will get elected. But how do you make a decision on the issues? You have all these issues you've been hearing about for weeks on the doors. How do you decide what's the first campaign and what's the first action? Asking. That's my guy here. Asking, yes, you will ask. But what's the process?
Would you pick something, like narrow it down a bit, so to pick the ones that you've heard the most, and then take a vote on a sort of smaller number?
Right, and what's your argument that people are going to have to make a decision between all these important issues and decide on just one?
What's your argument?
Yeah, how does the leadership handle? You got the organizing committee at the front there. They've opened the meeting to discussion of issues. 5 or 6 issues come up. how do they start to manage that part of the meeting about discussion of issues? So, part of what you do with issues is you try to get people to focus on how to deal with an issue. So you want an issue that's immediate. Yeah, you don't want something that, hey, they're all in this first group meeting, there are 200 people there, and they want to talk about something that they can't deal with for 3 years. So you want it to be immediate, something that if there's going to be a campaign or action, it's soon. It's within the character and of the rest of the organization. It's moving, it's happening. Something's going to be immediate, we're going to take action. So it's got to be immediate. It's got to be specific. It can't be, you know what? We got to end poverty. End poverty now. Who can disagree? I think we should. But what's exactly, and I know there are even campaigns, end poverty now campaigns, but I'll be damned if I know how you make that specific enough that you can win or lose, right? And then the other thing that you want issues to be is winnable. You're building an organization. I tell you, people argue that losing builds good character. You know, if you watch sports at all, you hear that all the time. Well, they lost, but it really helped the character of the team. Well, you know, in organizing, losing just means you're just like every other organization they've ever been a part of, which lost. So you really want to try, to the degree you can, to pick a first issue and first campaign that you have at least a chance of winning. And you will have heard these issues, as you described, for weeks. So you'll have a sense of what sort of baskets or boxes they fall into, and which ones there's, as you were saying, already research and some discussion on that might be specific, immediate, realizable. Usually I use the word realizable. What a strange word, realizable. But well, that's what. So you're sorting through the process, and one of the hardest parts of the discussion in that first meeting is how to narrow down what we call the laundry list of all the issues that are in the community. So part of what you're convincing people is that in the process of the organization, you'll get to every one of those issues. The real question is which one you do first. It's not that any issue is less important than the other, or that any is going to be less committed or engaged by the organization. It's only an issue of timing and sequencing. When you do it, and in what order you do it. Timing and sequencing. So, routinely, the critique of many community organizations is that the issue selection is too small. You know, they're just going after loose dogs, or stop signs, or traffic controls, or, you know, some little puny thing that doesn't seem to be of consequence. And that would be an accurate critique. Although what you're trying to do still, you have to win. So you have to build a pattern of winning. And clearly you have a better chance of winning small things at the beginning than you have of ending poverty now. So you want to be realistic within the expectations of the organization to scale and grow, but you also want to make sure that you're committed and the organization will be committed to doing everything it can to win that first campaign. It's very difficult to build a powerful long-term organization if you lose the first campaign, as you can imagine. How many of you have personal experiences with being part of an organization? All of you? Let's just say all of you. So, what's your experience with winning? By a show of hands.
Absolutely liberating. It's wonderful. It's a great feeling. There is a great sense of togetherness when you first realise, oh my God, it could be true. And then later on, it's, oh my God, I didn't think I was capable of doing this. I saw when I was about to through, and I will tell you, I can go to work, and then I've done it. And then it gives you even more confidence to even push through even further and to get on. And it's very, very inspiring. it's also very difficult sometimes to do the right, because it's possible to get overconfident and start to take on too much. And then you think, oh my God, yeah, I had that first success, I had that success, but I think I got slightly carried away and too exciting, too over-motivating. So it's very difficult sometimes to say, right, well, let's take a break there, let's sit back, let's take a break, and learn from all the experiences with bad science, the stressful situation, not to move on to the route, and just, cool down, cool off.
There's a great story when I was an organizer for welfare rights in the late 60s about a group of welfare recipients, all women on aid to families with dependent children in Newark, New Jersey, which is across the river from New York. And they were doing an action on the welfare office, and they were demanding school clothing for children, because it was about time for school to start. And they'd been in there, they had a couple hundred people, they set in on the welfare office in Newark, and they were just, right going into it. Welfare director came to them after a couple of hours of sitting in the office and said, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to give you school clothing for children. So then the leadership in the group caucused to decide if that was enough. So they went over and caucused, the exhilaration of having just won their demand on school clothing. Well, one of the goals of the National Welfare Rights Organization was adequate income, which we assigned as, whatever that figure was at the time, didn't matter to. So they went back and caucused and said, okay, now look, the welfare office, we've broken. We just won. We got, school clothing for children. Let's go back in there. Instead of agreeing to school clothing, let's go back in and demand adequate income now. So they, got a head of steam. They went back in there and they demanded adequate income now. And so 2 hours later, they were arrested. Because, of course, that's what happened when you sit in for 6 hours in a public facility. So they were arrested, and did they win adequate income? No. Did they win school clothing for children? No. But they were, as you were telling your story, they had the head of steam, they had victory in their eyes, and just didn't exactly know when to put the brakes on that bad boy. But most people raised their hand that they hadn't had that much experience with winning. And so you were very good at sharing with us the exhilaration of winning, but a lot of people just are looking at you like, oh, well, what kind of animal in the zoo are you? That would be nice, but I've never been down that road. Dude.
I love the question actually been struggling with a lot recently. When there's a big presence of weird support group, you just kind of find yourself wondering what the hell I'd actually do with something. And I kind of thought about it for a really long time though, and I realised that because there's been points where I have felt really great relation about what I'm doing, what I felt like we really fun this time and stuff, whoever the bad guy is in whatever scenario. And it's, I guess, the difference between feeling what is a win for your organisation and a win for who you're meant to represent. And I think just about everything I could call a victory, which I wouldn't actually call a victory in light of my analysis on it now, has been a victory for my organisation that I'm a part of, whatever I am at the time, not an actual victory for the people that I represent. So does that make sense? That's always how I felt about victory. It's not really, if I actually got a real victory about people that were meant to represent through the organisation that I'm working through, then I'll be sure to tell you about it.
Well, we'll be on the edge of our chair waiting for the news. Okay, other depressing stories?
It's not a depressing one.
Okay, well, other stories.
Well, it's kind of in the middle. I guess like the ECTAG, the Edinburgh Private Tennis Action Group, we've had quite good wins over tennis fees and criminal landlords. It's been, and for us as a group, it's felt like, I think it's felt really good, but at the same time, because the organisation isn't as broad based, there's not hundreds and hundreds of people in it. I don't think it's felt like that kind of elation that's passed on. There have been wins that have come through, I guess, lobbying and publicity type campaigning rather than this kind of mass movement type stuff. And the wins still feel good, but I feel like it feels like a qualitatively different thing
Well, you should learn to be happier with winning. It's really, as you can see from your brothers and sisters, it's more rare than you think, so you shouldn't be so picky. When it comes along, take it, you know? Other experiences, yeah?
University one, like all the physical stuff individuals, so like we found that, we've got someone's got water fixed, we've got water pressure fixed, like run a washing machine. We worked on the campaign, we've got like the list refurbished, so that was kind of a bigger thing. We've got like new children's like play area stuff. But we lost like our recent campaign, which is against Rathke, which was kind of big profile, but they wanted to go inside 4.6% rent hike, which is over like a big rent hike last year as well. And like that was quite a big thing, and like looking back on it, like the amount of money that they were going to gain from that was like far in excess of the pressure that we could put on. So I can see how it was winnable, but it was still worth it in a way. We were trying to, like, I was kind of really negative about it, but actually people that I kind of brought in and got involved, they were actually just really excited that we actually forced them to acknowledge that there was opposition, that we managed to get like a big petition round, that we forced them to come and actually meet with tenants in a big meeting, or be able to give them a complete workstation. We had to force the people to like come to meet with us. So we had like panels up, and so like other people thought that there was successes, even though we lost the kind of red light campaign, but winning sales was.
Well, and don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that you're going to win every campaign. I'm just saying it's crucial to win the first campaigns. I mean, having won a lot of what you're calling, small potatoes, it's a little bit easier for you to lose a campaign because people now have the confidence, your members. I mean, first remember, depending on who you organize, I organize low to moderate income people, so their expectations of victory are zero. They actually expect to lose. So, once again, never get confused between how you feel as an organizer and what your own members think. So, your members are, frankly, way more resilient sometimes than the organizers. Because they kind of understand the way power works, and they kind of understand the way class works, and they kind of understand that the odds are always against them. So, they're actually more surprised. I mean, the reason I have a story from Newark and you have a story you're telling without all the details is because to finally win, I mean, what a narcotic that is. Wow, I mean, the sun shined on me today. That probably is not a metaphor that works here. But many other places in the world we organize, the sun shines on people. Sometimes way too much. If we could balance what you have and what many places I work at, it would be a wonderful climate. But so their expectations are different, and you always have to keep their expectations central, a more central place than your own expectations. But the point becomes, in this process of having this discussion at the meeting, you want to, you can't guarantee a win, but you want people to try to have the conversation in that meeting along the lines of trying to decide what they have the best chance of winning as a first campaign. And this may surprise you, it may not, but for most people, even brand new in that meeting, they understand it's better for the organization to try to win. So even though their personal pet issue may be X, many times they'll lead the fight for Y because they understand, hey, we've got to win this first one. And if it's true that you'll get to X, I'm okay. Let's win, and then I'll make sure my issue gets up there. And you want to encourage that process. Part of the, so that's it. Empathy, I mean, an advantage you have, you'd be surprised if I talk to many groups in the U.S. now and other countries of 30-odd people like you are, how many people have no experience with organizations anymore. So a lot of people are slacklers, they don't mind pressing the like on Facebook or signing an internet petition or, signing somebody's petition on the street corner or whatever. But that's a light lift, right? I guess there's an elevator. But that's no heavy lifting to do that. That's slacktivism in my terms. So, but they don't have as much organizational experience as they once did. And this is part of the problem of what generation we organize as opposed to, people 50 years ago who have vibrant experience in there with the labor unions or were active in their church or civic organizations or veterans group. this whole theory that a guy named Robert Putnam argues, and a lot of it is wrong when you actually read the books, but there's a whole concept called bowling alone. Anybody hear about this? Anybody ever have to take sociology or whatever? Well, his point, reduced to a nutshell, is that there was this phenomenon in the U.S. that more people were bowling, but bowling leagues were dying. So people were no longer joining leagues and going to bowl every Wednesday night with their buddies, but they were bowling more. They were bowling alone, just paying for the lane, maybe going with a buddy night, no teams, no. And his whole point became, and the larger study was the weakness of organizational life, and you can't deny that. Maybe you can in the UK, but you can't in the rest of the world. Labor density has fallen like a rock in our generation. I mean, I don't think we're good organizers, but then the numbers actually prove how humble we need to be. So labor membership is falling, maybe not in the UK, I don't know, certainly in the rest of the world. Membership in churches, who goes to church anymore? Well, some people do, the elderly, God love them. Membership is falling, those are the facts. That's why you have a Pope now from Argentina and other places. I mean, they don't have any membership, you know, in whole parts of the world now compared to what they have in the emerging world. And you just go through the list. Boy Scouts, I mean, any major mass organization, veterans groups, membership is down. People just have less organizational experience. Well, if they have less organizational experience, they also have less of a way to empathize in their own experience what to expect from an organization. And for those of you who might think about being an organizer, it's actually important. If you've had experience being part of a local group, it actually tells you something about how you would want to be treated as a member. You never been a member of anything, or never even been a low-level leader. It's not that you can't learn it. I'm sure you're all bright, smart people. But it's harder if you've never had an experience that helps you translate what you're trying to do to where you've been yourself. Does that make any sense to anybody? So it used to be, you know, when I started out as an organizer in the late 60s, you could talk to people about were they in the student council, or were they Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, or were they active in their church, or were they singing in the choir? Well, you wouldn't bother with those conversations today in the United States. I mean, you'd be talking to yourself. They say, oh, God, are you old as dirt or what? No, this is not, I mean, Facebook, I mean, yeah, I can organize. I put a meeting together with Facebook. Wow. How do you do that? And they actually, I had someone the other day that was asking me about raising money. And said all their experience with raising money was based on social networking. Was there any other way to do that? Well, you can imagine how difficult it would be to have a conversation about door knocking with this person. And what do you know? You take your computer to the door, you know, your laptop or your iPad or whatever, and you say, you like this organization? I can't even imagine how to have a conversation. But she's not here in this room, so we don't have to have that conversation. And luckily, for all losing experience that we seem to have had, you have had some experience in the head nodding with being part of an organization, big, smaller, and different. And that's something to build on. And I think it's part of what my argument would be in looking at least how ACORN is organized in the past, that the role for members, the role for leaders, and a practical, pragmatic way in which you're looking at the selection of issues. You're taking that from the by and by, and we'll all have freedom someday, to something very specific and very immediate and very realizable that everybody would understand if you win that it makes a difference. Which is part of your point, right, about Edinburgh Tennis Association. And sometimes people don't have to have experienced that if you do a good enough job communicating, as you were arguing earlier, what the victory was and why it was important to people and why it was important to everybody and how everybody could take advantage of it. So if we were back in Newark with those ladies in the Welfare Rights Group and they had taken that school clothing, they had taken the victory when they had it in their hand, even though there were only 200 of them then, it may have been more possible for them to go back and talk to the other 30,000 people that were on AFDC at that time about how they could also win school clothing for children, join the organization, and potentially put more pressure on that welfare system to raise the level of benefits. Maybe it wouldn't have been adequate income now, but it might have been a whole lot different organizational story we were telling than this sort of, you know, tragic comic affair of them going for the barricades there and walking away, you know, with nothing. So, in looking at how the ACORN model works, you can come out of this with a consensus on the issues. Maybe the top 2 or 3 issues, but you would come up with a decision coming out of that meeting based on a vote of what issue the group's going to do first, and when that action is going to be. And that first action would be hopefully within a very short period of time, but certainly no more than 1 to 2 weeks. You can't have people coming out of the high of excitement, the exhilaration of meeting, and then not knowing when they're going to take action to actually put that in, to implement that decision and see if it is done. And then you go forward. And if everybody did the right thing, and you would hang in there until you won. Might take a while, depending on how good the issues are, how good the folks are, and how you do a good job of them cleaning up. You take everybody who came to the meeting, move forward. Everybody who didn't come to the meeting, you still have that whole list of yeses and maybes. You then get back every one of those people, and the fact that they didn't come to the meeting, you interpret as, you never say, hey, dude, I thought you were coming to the meeting. Where were you? Would that get him to the next meeting? But it's amazing how many times people say that. Hey man, I thought you told me you were coming to the next meeting. You weren't there. Where were you? Bus run over you? You know, dog eat your homework. What happened? No, man, you missed a great meeting. You're not going to believe the next one because this meeting was blah, blah, blah. Here's what happened. And I don't ever give him a chance to talk about why his lame ass went to the meeting. Because once again, my point is, I want him, he had originally said yes, I want to keep his commitment that I thought I had at the doors, or whatever that was. I want to keep that evergreen until I get it. Remember, you know, Fred Ross 3 times on Cesar Chavez's door until he got him. Right? I want to get him and every other yes, and maybe I still may go back to someday. Because the whole point is from whatever that 200 is, there are 2,000 households. You know, where I'm trying to build up in a series of steps is in an ideal organizing drive. Within a year, I want there to be 40 to 50% of that neighborhood actually as members. Now, does that happen all the time? No. People end up, you know, the organizer servicing 5 or 6 groups, she's servicing, you know, 10,000 households and 1,000 members. And eventually, you can't do all the work, and maybe the organizing committee won't do nothing, blah, blah, blah. But is it possible? Yes. We've many times organized 20, 30, even more than 50% dues paying membership within a community. Is that group stronger? Sure, it's stronger. But the facts are, because everybody else is so weak, if you only have 10% membership, you're still stronger than everybody else. And in the same way I said the expectation of your own members and leaders are to lose, believe me, the expectation of the targets is that you're going to be a candy ass. That's another American expression, it may not be not a translation. Their expression is you're going to fold. That you'll show up, you'll have your little sign, you'll have your little petition, you'll talk to some newspaper reporter, you'll put it on your website, and you'll go home and I'll never hear from your ass again. And the truth is, their expectation is usually right. I mean, most people, they don't win that first day. I mean, we're going to go into campaigns all afternoon, but it's amazing how important just plain old persistence is. Just not being willing to say you lost.
How is your organization dealing with unforward attitude, or what's the point?
Has to do with what now?
How do you handle apathy? How do you handle, what's the point anyway, politicians always agree, always lying, where it make you believe one thing because you just believe that at that time. But a year time, 2 years time, 10 years time, that's what you what is the point? Like, how do you handle this attitude?
Well, we argue based on our experience is different, that we can make a difference. But once again, I'm not organizing 100% of the people. I'm organizing, and I represent, and I service that membership, those people who decide, in fact, they can do something. So that person who wants to tell me, you know, every you know, depressing experience they have and why it's not possible. This may not, and I'll tell them, this may not be the organization for you. Say, I've been in this work forever. I really would still like to see us win the big ones. Well, I'm still, you know, able to see it. So I really wish y'all would hurry up.